I think we'll start now. We have
Yes.
touched 150 people at the bottom. So good morning, everybody. It's a special day today. Let me start by thanking all our clients. I'm Abhijit Bhave. Uh, you have taken time out to come here on the call, and I hope that all of you, your families are safe and as happy as you can be. You must have heard they say customer is the king. Yesterday, I was playing a game of chess with my son, and then I realized that the entire team protects the king, it defends the king, and then takes the king to victory. The same happens in wealth management. We are your wealth managers. We have to defend you, we have to protect you, and then we have to take you on the path of victory towards the victory. At Karvi Private Wealth, we have defined our mission as helping our clients achieve their dreams and goals. And that is how we have defined our why. We talk to our clients, identify the investment goals and gaps, and create an ideal customized solution based on three pillars: SLR, safety, liquidity, returns. And then we partner the journey of the client with him and her towards achieving those dreams and goals. Today is also a very special day because we have a very special guest. Nilesh Shah has joined us today, and he will guide us in this crisis situation, the crisis mindset on how to get back on track to achieve our investment and wealth goals. Nilesh is a living legend for the mutual fund industry, for the wealth management industry. He is a gold medalist chart accountant. He is a cost accountant. He is a star fund manager who has won many awards. He has worked in ICICI, Franklin Templeton, Axis, and now has been with the Kotak Mutual Fund. He's also the chairman of AMFI. Now, I am a big fan of Nilesh. I am a big fan. His inspiring TED talk, you should go and watch. One talk where he talks about comparing India vis-a-vis China. And it does not say what Mr. Modi should do. It says what I as an Indian should do. I'm also his fan because of his various mythological and desi stories that he uses to explain the most difficult situations into very, very simple solutions. I remember when pigs had happened in Europe, he had used the story of two families, one poor and one rich family getting into a marital partnership and how that leads to problems. Today's situation, if I use Sanskrit, is a na bhuto na bhavishyati situation. Something that has not happened in the past, something that may not hopefully happen in the future. And it's a crisis of a century, crisis of a lifetime. But practically speaking, a lot of us, including me, have lost money in equity. We have also lost money in debt. Real estate already is down. And if I talk of a fixed deposit, we read about banks having issues. So, jaye bhi to jaye kaha? That is the question. And if I go back to mythology, do we need the 10th Vishnu avatar to happen? Do we need the Kalki avatar to happen? Do we need Samudra Manthan? Do we need something as drastic? In Mumbai, we use the line "Umeed pe duniya kayam hai," and that is what people in the equity markets always are: very bullish, very confident. And at Karvi Private Wealth, we are very positive about the future. It is in line with our core values. We have four core values: iPod, integrity, positivity, ownership, and dependability. And we are very positive about the future. Uh, in wealth management, investments, we are equity overweight. And we are also, by the way, recommending to a lot of our customers to review their entire insurance portfolios: health insurance, critical illness insurance, life insurance. We believe that every challenge is an opportunity, and so is the case today. I will now invite the expert himself. With great pleasure, I invite Mr. Nilesh Shah to take over from here and tell us what to do in these days and what to expect going ahead.
Thank you, Abhijit, for those kind words, and very good morning to all of you. As Abhijit mentioned, this is na bhuto na bhavishyati. We have seen medical crisis like plague in the early 90s in Surat, which locked down the entire city of Surat. We have witnessed SARS, Ebola, bird flu, swine flu over the last 20 years. But we have never seen anything like coronavirus, which shuts down half of the globe. We have seen financial crisis like Asian crisis 1997, subprime crisis 2008, taper tantrum 2013, demonetization 2016. But we have never seen anything like this in 2020. There was a movie of George Clooney, Perfect Storm, where his fishing trawler to a point where storms were converging. Today, Indian economy and global economy is like that trawler, which is in a perfect spot where three storms are converging: medical crisis, economic crisis, and financial crisis. We have never seen a perfect storm like this, and hence we are experiencing bouts of volatility. The first question which comes into mind: what is the cost of coronavirus? Is it large? Is it small? Is it affordable? Is it non-affordable? Well, the exact cost, because we are still paying. Coronavirus is not behind us, it is still with us, and hence the meter is running. But if you want to look at in a very, very childish way of looking at things, back of envelope, this is how it should be measured. Current GDP roughly about $3,000 billion. If shut for 30 days, 100%, and all months contribute equal to GDP, about $150 billion. Assume that 50% activity continued during the month, loss of $125 billion. If we opened up on 17th of May, that will be about 47 days of lockdown, rounded off $190 billion numbers. Now, these are all rounded off numbers. There are lots of simplistic assumptions. Real life is far more complex than this. Over and above this loss of output, we have to worry about cost of restarting economy. Not like power, switch on kiya to chalu, switch kiya to. It will require massive struggle to restart economy. So effectively, for 47 days, India will have to pay loss of output of about $190 billion, plus whatever is the cost of restarting Indian economy. Against that, the benefits which will come to India: lower oil prices. Oil is our Kundli's Rahu and Ketu. Our Rahu Kalam starts when oil prices go. Our Rahu Kalam ends when oil prices come down. We will save at current oil prices about $40 to $45 billion in oil import bill. Now, Pradhan Mantri talked about made in India goods, Swadeshi. We have $60 billion trade deficit with China. A lot of things we need to import from China, a lot of things are unnecessary. If collectively as a country we can replace made in China goods with made in India goods by $20 billion and bring that deficit down from $60 to $40 billion, that's a saving to Indian economy. My opinion is that damage to Indian economy through coronavirus is about $130 billion. And we have on that restarting economic cost of restarting economy. And the only way this can be met is through foreign direct investment, fiscal stimulus, and monetary stimulus. Today, of course, markets are down, but yesterday markets were up. And one can easily ask a question: markets are going up, the economy is going down. What is the contradiction between market and economy? Well, there is no contradiction between market and economy. Market is probably focused on this kind of scenario. On left-hand side, we have medical solution. On y-axis, we have fiscal and monetary stimulus. Now, in the most fortunate scenario, where there is early medical solution emerging and fiscal and monetary stimulus is very large, then we could see V-shaped recovery. We will fall sharply in April, May, June, but we can bounce back quickly in July, August, September, whenever medical solution emerges. On the other hand, if medical solution is delayed for a long, then our recovery will be L-shaped. We will go sharply, not recover at all. Somewhere between V and L, all other alphabets comes into play. Today at 9,200 Nifty, it is believing that fiscal stimulus is large, monetary stimulus is large, and it will start working, and more medical solution is emerging quickly. If all the three assumptions are not met, then markets will have to go down. If all three are achieved, then probably we can safely say that markets hit the bottom. The bottom of the economy and bottom of the market will be determined based on medical solution and fiscal and monetary stimulus. Now, the next question which comes into play is that, if we see the economy, the news are fairly negative. Companies in hotel, tourism, travel, aviation, multiplex, retailing, small and medium enterprises, they are being hit very badly. Even companies where business activities have operated like pharma, hospital infrastructure, medical equipment, food processing, food distribution, online distribution, they are also suffering some damage here or there. Now, in this kind of scenario where economy is suffering so much damage, should we just not sell everything in equity market at 9,200 Nifty and move into cash? And later on, when economy bottoms out, we should invest into the market? Well, that's not the right approach. Undoubtedly, markets will go up and down, but moving out of market completely and moving into safety of cash will not be appropriate. Why do I say so? It is based on these three numbers. Our 10-year historical average market cap to GDP ratio is 76%. Current market is trading at somewhere between 50 to 55%. On a 9,500 Nifty, it goes to 55. 9,000, probably it comes to 50. So somewhere it is in that range. Today, when market is trading way below its historical average, it is time to buy. It is not the time to sell. Market is trading below its historical average only because of this uncertainty. If this uncertainties were not there, then they wouldn't trade at this level. Third thing, in October 2008, when subprime crisis was at its peak, market made a bottom just for one day at 8,000 Sensex. At that point of time, market cap to GDP ratio was 43%. So somewhere we can fairly conclude that buying at 50-55% market cap to GDP ratio is definitely advantageous because you are buying way below historical average. But at the same time, we must keep provision that markets could go as low as 43% market cap to GDP ratio also. In this downfall at 7,600 Nifty in April first week, market cap to GDP ratio had come down to 47%. So I wouldn't recommend anyone to sell everything now and move into cash because these are levels to buy, not to sell. But at the same time, one has to be very, very careful in investing because clearly markets will be swinging between hope and fear, between optimism and pessimism. In our opinion, markets will be swinging something like this. Whenever fiscal stimulus is announced, like it was announced day before yesterday, market was up. Whenever monetary stimulus is announced, market is up. Whenever medical breakthrough comes, market will be up. Whenever number of cases, number of death goes down, markets will be up. But in absence of those news, markets can go down. Obviously, global factors also have their own influence. So apart from all other normal factors which push market to move up and down, coronavirus related 4 factors will be critical for markets to move: fiscal stimulus, monetary stimulus, medical breakthrough, and number of death or number of impacted cases. Now, in this scenario where markets are going to swing between optimism and pessimism, what should an investor do? My recommendation is that you divide your incremental investments in 2 parts. One part to be invested when market is in uncertainty mode. It doesn't know what will be the cost of lockdown. It doesn't know what will be medical solution. Because of this uncertainty, markets are trading, discounting this uncertainty at this level of valuation. You put half of your money, half of your incremental investment in multiple tranches in a falling market. Yesterday market was up, avoid investing. Today markets are down, try to put some money. You must invest in multiple tranches during this uncertainty, minimum 10, maybe even 15. so that you can average yourself into the market. If the past is an indicator, your investment should have happened anywhere between 9,500 to 7,600 Nifty on a falling market. That way, half of your incremental investment will get into market in the uncertainty mode. The other half you should invest when you get confirmation on medical solution. This is necessary because in case medical solution is delayed, markets will fall further, and hence you should be able to average it out. That way you will be able to balance between uncertainty and hope, between fear and optimism. That will give you good entry point in equity market at this point of time. Now one can ask what kind of medical solution we are looking at. Well, there are two kinds of solution. One, a combination of drug which will cure patient. Second, vaccine which will prevent occurrence. Today, different doctors across the world are using different drugs for treatment of coronavirus. Indian doctors started with hydroxychloroquine, an anti-malaria drug, and lopinavir, which was an anti-AIDS drug. Then they changed the combination to hydroxychloroquine tablets and erythromycin. Novartis is now conducting human trial for hydroxychloroquine to ascertain its efficacy for treatment of coronavirus patient. Gilead had developed a drug called remdesivir for Ebola. They are now into phase 3 trial for treatment of coronavirus patient. They have outsourced this technology, this molecule to Jubilant Life Science and one more company for manufacturing remdesivir in India. I think that other company is Cipla. There is another antiviral drug called favipiravir, which was manufactured by a Japanese company that also is in human trial based on Chinese experience. And Stride Sarcolab and Glenmark Pharmaceuticals have been given permission to manufacture favipiravir. There is anti-arthritis drug called Kevzara by Sanofi that also is in human trial for coronavirus patient. There is another drug by Roche called Actemra, which is also in human trial for coronavirus. Some doctors have started using even anti-leprosy drug called Sepsivac for coronavirus patient. Somewhere medical professionals are trying to use permutation combination to find out what is the right dosage through which a person can be cured. It could be anti-malaria drug, it could be antiviral drug, it could be anti-leprosy drug, it could be anti-AIDS drug, it could be anti-arthritis drug, but they are trying to find that standard protocol. On the other hand, on vaccine, there are more than 100 companies which are developing this vaccine, of which 8 to 9 are looking fairly promising. Moderna, Gilead, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, CanSino Biological, Sinotech Bio. These are all the companies which are at various stages of human trial. The most promising one from Indian point of view is University of Oxford's vaccine trial led by Dr. Sarah Gilbert. They have chosen Serum Institute as one of the manufacturers for that vaccine, and Serum Institute based in Pune, belonging to Poonawalla Group, have talked about making 50 lakh doses of this vaccine and keeping it ready. In case the human trial is successful, they will be ready to hit the manufacturing, they'll be ready to hit the market at a very early stage. Somewhere market needs comfort that there is a standard protocol of drugs which will cure patients and there is a vaccine which will prevent occurrence. In absence of those two, economic activity cannot stop, but then the model of containing coronavirus will be combination of three things. One, lockdown like in Wuhan, like in France, Italy, UK, India. Second, randomized testing like South Korea and strict quarantine of impacted people. And third, maintenance of public and private hygiene like Japan, where most people wear masks while going out and they keep on washing their hands. So in absence of medical solution, we'll have to live with the virus through combination of testing and isolation, public and private hygiene, and selective lockdown. Somewhere between this the economy will bottom out at the intersection of medical solution and fiscal and monetary stimulus. Then the next question comes, Nilesh bhai, fiscal stimulus have come, monetary stimulus is coming. What's your opinion about the same? I think on the monetary stimulus, RBI has done a great job in increasing liquidity in banking system. But these banks were not lending money. Money was with banks, but not with the borrowers. And unless until money moved from banks to borrower, the whole purpose is defeated. RBI did a great job in cutting interest rate. Policy rates came down, but market yields didn't come down. Cost of borrowing for SME entrepreneurs, for entities in business didn't come down as much. Now with this fiscal stimulus which was announced yesterday, money will move from banks to borrowers. For 3 lakh crore SME funding, government is taking the credit risk. For other 70,000 crore, 20,000 crore for stressed SMEs, 50,000 crore by way of equity infusion, government is trying to ensure that bankers find lending comfortable and they start moving money from their balance sheet to borrowers' balance sheet. NBFC also has been given a package of about 70,000 crore, 30,000 crore guarantee for full amount, 40,000 crore for partial amount. Combination of this 3,70,000 crore funding towards SME and 70,000 crore funding towards NBFC sector will ensure that money will start moving from business, from banks to businesses, and economic activity will start moving forward. But this is just the first over which we have played well. The match is not yet won. We have to keep on playing like this for a lot of time so that we can contain after effects of coronavirus. Prime Minister talked about land, labor, liquidity, and law. These are very, very important things in order for us to grow our economy. Now, one question then comes that we all know the pain of coronavirus. What about the gain of coronavirus? I talked about lower oil prices. I talked about replacement of made in China goods with made in India goods. These are two immediately achievable benefits of coronavirus. Fiscal and monetary stimulus we talked about. These are also positive of coronavirus, albeit they are necessary because of coronavirus. But there is one big opportunity for India which they must capture. In 1980, India and China were of similar size. China became manufacturer to the world. They became 4 times bigger than India in 40 years. They grew very fast. We were in the slow track. Now, world is trying to move away from China. They are suspicious of China because of this Wuhan virus. They want to move industry out of China to other places. Every single country from Thailand, Malaysia, Korea, Indonesia, Cambodia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Mexico are eyeing the same movement. They want companies moving out of China to come to their country. We have to bring them to our country. Our infrastructure is poor compared to other people. Our bureaucracy, ease of doing business is poor compared to other people. So we have to make an extra effort to ensure that this company come to India. What will help us? One, this tremendous goodwill which we have created, whereby China is seen as someone who gave virus. We are seen as someone who is giving hydroxychloroquine tablet. And if University of Oxford research is successful, we will be providing vaccine as well. We must encash that goodwill for bringing companies to India. Second, we can give access to 1.36 billion consumer market. All our competitors put together does not have 1.36 billion consumer market. We are the only country which can provide that kind of large market. Using these two things, goodwill and market, local market, we must bring as many companies as possible from China to India. Let me give you an example how big this opportunity is. Samsung is a Korean chaebol. It came to India long before it went to Vietnam. It makes in India TV, fridge, AC, mobile phones. The turnover is about 10 to 12 billion dollars. In Vietnam, though they went late, they make in Vietnam and sell all over the world. Their turnover in Vietnam is $62 billion. They contribute 28% of GDP to Vietnam. Vietnam in the last 10 years has grown at a faster pace than India. And the secret behind their success is Samsung. Now, if we can bring companies like that into India, help them grow, you can imagine what will happen to our growth rate. So this is the biggest opportunity of coronavirus, where India has to encash its goodwill and leverage its local market and get as many companies as possible across various sectors, from textiles, chemicals, garments, soft toys, engineering products, mobile phones, electrical accessories, electronic accessories, electronic items, consumer durables, and so on and so forth. If we can do that, I can assure you that Indian markets, Indian equity markets and economy both will be at a much higher level than what it is today. But it will require flawless execution. Now, next question then comes is then Nilesh bhai, you said we have to invest half the money in uncertainty mode, half the money when medical solution emerges. But what kind of sector, what kind of company we should look at it? My request will be go diversified this time rather than concentrated. Of course, some sectors will do well, some will not do, but a lot of behaviors are changing, and we must keep an open mind to see how behaviors are changing. One part suggests that now work from home will become a part of life. Commercial premises demand will come down as people would not like to keep commercial premises and have large offices. Most people will operate from home. Now, what will be its impact on various industries, various businesses, we have to see. Keeping a diversified portfolio will minimize the risk right now. Obviously, it will have some impact on return also, but going diversified will be more appropriate. Second question then comes, should we go large cap, should we go mid cap, should we go small cap? Right now, large caps are available at 4-year before level, mid caps are available at 6-year before level, and small caps are available at 9-year before level. Clearly, this is very, very attractive opportunity to invest. And normally large cap runs immediately after correction. So if you are conservative investor, go for large cap, they will move first. If you are average investor, go for multi-cap. And if you are aggressive investor, you can wait for your portfolio to move, then small and mid cap will be appropriate. Next question then comes, what should we be looking at apart from equity? Well, gold looks very attractive. Normally, when interest rates are low and liquidity is high, gold does well. Last time gold moved from $750 to about $1,900. It was between November 2008 to September 2011. Those were the days of low interest rates and high liquidity, just like today. Gold has already moved from $1,450 to $1,700, but we think there is more room for upside. You can invest in gold in physical format, in gold ETFs or gold bonds. If you're buying smaller lots in physical gold, please remember that you are paying 15 to 30% price differential because smaller denomination gold is sold at a much, much higher premium. If you are coming to gold ETF, you'll have to pay a fees because we provide daily liquidity. 1 to 3 year horizon will be appropriate for gold ETF. If you are looking to invest on a 5 to 7 year horizon, then please go for gold bonds. These are issued by government. They give you coupon income over and above gold price movement, and they are a bit illiquid in nature. But with a 5 to 7 year horizon, gold bonds are superior way of investing in gold compared to gold ETF as well as physical gold. The next question then comes, Nilesh bhai, what about fixed income? We have seen Franklin Templeton restricting redemptions. They are putting 6 schemes for winding down. Can it happen in Kotak Mutual Fund? Well, as a MD of Kotak Mutual Fund, I'm always going to say that no, it will never happen in Kotak Mutual Fund. But my recommendation is that you please look at my portfolio. It's transparently available on my website. On 30th April, you can open up the fact sheet and you will see the securities in which we have invested. 92% of my portfolio as on 30th April is invested into AAA rated assets, GSECs, treasury bills, state development loans, certificate of deposits, commercial papers, debentures issued by top-notch corporates. Now, this portfolio is relatively far more liquid, relatively far more secured, even before the fiscal stimulus was announced. After announcement of fiscal stimulus, you will definitely agree that this is high quality portfolio. The other 8% of the portfolio also is invested in AA plus, AA minus, AA rated assets. When you see the names, you will feel comfortable staying invested with them. So my recommendation is that don't take my word for granted. Look at our portfolio. Once you look at the portfolio, I'm sure your judgment will be same as mine, that there's no harm in continuing with Kotak Mutual Fund's fixed income funds. The next question then comes, within fixed income, should we go for interest rate or duration funds, or should we go for credit risk fund? Well, both the funds serve different purpose. In duration, there is higher volatility because we take interest rate call. And in about last 60 days, interest rates have moved from 6.5% on the higher side to about 590 on the lower side. There is a 60 basis point movement which has occurred in last 60 days. And if you are looking to invest in fixed income fund, you can definitely look at dynamic bond fund or PSU bond fund or corporate bond fund or short-term bond fund. Here the quality of portfolio is tilted towards AAA rated assets, government assets, PSU assets. The only risk there is interest rate volatility because interest rates are going up and down very rapidly in last few weeks. On the credit risk fund, you are looking to invest with a 3-year horizon. There will be ups and downs because of credit event. We don't expect any credit event to occur in our portfolio, but we have to be prepared for the worst. But if you are taking a 3-year horizon, despite current bout of volatility, credit risk fund have delivered return which is comparable to bank fixed deposits. So for clients who have 3-year plus horizon, credit risk fund is fine. For clients who don't want to take credit risk, dynamic bond fund, PSU bond fund, corporate bond fund or short-term bond fund will be appropriate. With this, Abhijit, Shantanu, I will stop my talk and open up for Q&A.
Thank you, Nilesh. It was a wonderful speech. It actually covered most of the questions what people would like to post. But still, nonetheless, there are definitely a few queries which people would like to understand further from here. I mean, the economic package which has been announced, you took us through the details and we expect some more details. But, world over packages have been announced. And as you rightly said, you did show the diagram and you mentioned that, these packages are helping in case as and when they are getting announced. But are they really definitely going to solve the problem for future, and where is the funding going to come for such kind of packages for India specifically?
So Shantanu, we need to play the game. If we surrender saying that, oh, the asking run rate is very high, or oh, Curtly Ambrose is bowling, he's 6'4", I am 5'5", how can I play? That means you have accepted defeat. You have to go with the mindset of Kapil Dev leading 1983 World Cup, that okay, things are bad, we don't have track record, but I still have to go and play to win the match. That positive attitude is necessary. Second, if on the first ball you hit a 6, it doesn't mean that second ball you can be relaxed. You still have to build your game. So we have taken good steps, but we must maintain the pace. Third, we need out-of-box thinking. Now, for example, all of us know that Indians have large amount of gold. It's more than probably $2 trillion. The problem with India is that most of this is unaccounted. It is lying in safe deposit lockers or tijoris. It's not there in the white economy. Now, what do I do to bring that dead assets into productive economy? It will require some out-of-box thinking. There are some suggestions given. Today, Business Standard carried an article that government is thinking of buying gold. If we can do some out-of-box thinking, raising resources for paying this is not a big thing. For example, this 3 lakh SME funding. Now, this is funding given. It doesn't mean that entire 3 lakh crore will be a loss. Many of these SMEs will be able to return the money. Even if I assume 10% NPA, that's only 30,000 crore funding. That also scattered over 4 years. 30,000 crore divided by 4 is roughly 7,500 crore a year. This is easily affordable. So we have to be creative in our thinking. We have to be using out-of-box solutions like monetization of gold for our purposes. We also have to encash our goodwill in bringing foreign direct investment. If we bring 20 Samsung, they can add $1 trillion to our economy. So we have to do multiple things. There is no one straight solution. We should use straight drive, we should use hook, we should do reverse sweep, we should do pull, we should do everything possible to score the run.
Completely agree with you on that piece. Definitely. One of our clients have actually posted a question. I mean, in today's date, a lot of banks bonds are available at 8 or 9%. They're basically perpetual bonds or different kind of bonds. Of course, they carry a higher risk. We've seen that in the case of Yes Bank. But having said that, this question has been posted over there, and they want to understand that whether they're a good option or not, or should they go through a debt fund only, or what exactly would be your view on that?
So obviously, these perpetual bonds were carrying an unwritten pact between regulator and market that those bonds will not be written off and they won't be used for adjusting against capital. And because of that unwritten agreement, unwritten pact, perpetual bonds were trading way below their fair value. The coupon income was 7.5%, 8%, 8.5% because of that unwritten pact. And obviously there was no announcement from RBI, but it was their conduct which gave that impression. So when weaker PSU banks were not in a position to meet their interest obligation, rules were changed, capital was infused, buyback was done, and all these things gave confidence to the market that perpetual bond, while on paper will be used for converting into equity in case there is a problem, in practical life it won't work. Yes Bank 81 bonds changed that pact. Now we hope and believe that it is only for private sector banks and not necessarily for public sector banks. Keeping this in mind, market has started repricing perpetual bonds from 7.5. SBI perpetual bond today is at 9%. Some of the weaker PSU banks are at 12 and 13% also. My feeling is that instead of going for one perpetual bond, try to go for a diversified perpetual bond. Go for PSU perpetual bond rather than private sector perpetual bond. And they should be able to deliver good return to the investors in today's scenario. Undoubtedly, there is a risk, but hopefully those risks will not materialize because of this unwritten pact between market and the regulator.
The other question is, we have a few NRI clients of ours also, and they're concerned about the dollar movement. Of course, dollar has been strengthening. And what is your view on the dollar going forward? Do you continue to see it strengthening from here, and how does it pan out?
So, to take a call on dollar per se has lots of consequences. Fed futures are now indicating negative interest rate. Yesterday, Fed chairman announced that he is not in favor of negative interest rate, but market is still pricing in negative interest rate. Now, can dollar depreciate if it's going to charge you money rather than pay you money? A huge possibility. Second, we have also seen record borrowing by US government. In this quarter, April, May, June 2020, US government is going to borrow $3 trillion. That is equivalent to India's GDP. What we have created over thousands of years, they are going to borrow in 3 months. Such excess borrowing, such large supply normally depreciates currency. More importantly, dollar has appreciated against all currency as reflected in DIY index. Now, these are all staked against dollar for depreciation. But at the same time, dollar is the safe currency. In times of crisis, people move money to dollar, and those flows can keep dollar on the stronger point. From India's point of view, rupee is around its fair value. It's neither too overvalued nor too undervalued. Our destiny is to depreciate because of our inflation and because of our productivity difference vis-a-vis our trading partners. So if you are in NRI, please count in 2 to 4% depreciation in rupee every year. Rupee does not move in a straight line. It swings in between. But in your portfolio, over 5 years, if you have to build a targeted rupee depreciation, it could be between 2 to 4% every year.
Thank you. One more important question. I mean, it's extremely important from one of the gentlemen. Very simple question, but an important one. What is your advice for senior citizens? Of course, they have not seen such kind of unprecedented volatility, and they are in a different stage of life. So, what would be your advice for them in terms of?
So one, you must invest in 775 RBI bonds. I think the maturity there is 5 or 7 years. It's one of the highest yielding instrument in that safe category at this point of time. Second, you should look at conservative credit risk fund, not aggressive credit risk fund, but conservative credit risk fund for your investment, maybe 10 to 15% of your portfolio. So let's say I'm giving a theoretical example just for specification purpose. Please don't take it as gospel's truth for every senior citizen. If my mother was looking to secure her retirement and she is 72 years of age today, I will put 30% of her savings into 775 RBI bonds. I will put 15% of her savings in credit risk fund divided over 5 funds, so 3% each. I will use systematic withdrawal plan from that credit risk fund to ensure that her monthly expenditure is available. Other 15% money I will put into bank fixed deposits, which can give her returns on a quarterly basis. I will avoid cooperative banks. I will avoid weaker private sector banks, and I will ensure that she is investing 5 lakh rupee per bank so that in case tomorrow something goes wrong, she is covered under DICGC credit guarantee scheme. So that will take care of 60% of his portfolio. They will give regular income to her, and that will ensure that she has reasonable income coming into her with reasonable amount of security. Another 20% of her portfolio, I will try to put it into a real estate, which I can put it on a rental basis. Now, commercial real estate, as I mentioned earlier, is going to see huge supply coming in, and it will not be easy to put that a property on rent. But one can look at showrooms, one can look at residential premises. You try to put 20% in real estate where mark-to-market volatility is not there, and you get reasonable yield, maybe 4 or 5% on this real estate, so that she has some current income and some capital appreciation at a later date. 20% of her money, I will put in Balanced Advantage Fund. This is my growth investment, just like real estate. And here the fund manager will move between equity levels looking at the valuation. So this combination, 60% safe, 40% risk, 60% giving regular income, 40% focused on capital appreciation, that will be the combination which I will use for a senior citizen. The purpose will be diversification, purpose will be tax-friendly regular income, and the purpose will be to outperform inflation as well, despite current challenges.
Thanks for putting it out so simply. I think it'll help our clients. See, mostly the senior citizens, they'll get a cue from there. One more question, it's an important question. Of questions people have been asking about it. Internationally, we've seen the passive funds, mostly ETFs and other things, have outperformed. In India, of course, we've seen the active funds outperform. But this question is not being posed by a lot of audience, and they're asking why should we continue to invest in active funds? A, B, what's your view on active funds like PMS, or for that matter, special situation funds, which have probably taken a bigger hit than a normal diversified fund at this point in time. So what's your view about?
Shantanu, we also run a special situation value PMS, and where performance has been fairly poor from a client point of view. I still have outperformed benchmark index, but when benchmark index is down 40% and you are down 30 or 35%, it doesn't appeal to a client. Value has been beaten out of shape all over the world. All value investors' performance has been absolutely poor across all the markets. This has been one particularly unique phase where value investing seems to have not worked at all. Growth investing really took off. Even in NASDAQ, if you see the FANG stocks plus, Microsoft, that's the leading index performer. As of today, I do believe that someday value philosophy will come back. How long you can keep on paying 70, 80 P for a good quality company and pay only 0.5 times price to book for a company which is good quality but has gone into turbulence right now. Value will bounce back at some point of time, but this is probably also a value investor who has lost so much money in special situation value PMS that he's trying to be optimistic about value. In terms of active versus passive, see, in Indian market, normally, how do we generate outperformance? We generate outperformance by going into next set of higher risk papers. So if I'm managing large cap fund, my outperformance by and large comes from next Nifty 50 stocks, 51 to 100, which I add into my portfolio. And that 51 to 100 does well compared to Nifty and gives me outperformance. If I go into Nifty mid cap 100, let's say it's 101 to 200 number of stocks, I try to go into 200 to 500 stocks to generate outperformance when markets are bullish, or I go into 1 to 100 stocks to generate outperformance when markets are falling. So going outside of index has always helped us generate outperformance. And my feeling is that at least for foreseeable future, maybe next 3 years, maybe next 5 years if we are lucky, active fund managers will still be able to outperform benchmark indices. Over a period of time, when our size becomes large, when markets become even more efficient than today, then undoubtedly our alpha generation capacity will come down. But I just hope and pray that I will retire before that. I still have 3 to 5 years opportunity at today's point of time.
So, very last few questions actually around. One question is basically people are saying that the crude prices have corrected, and we've seen. How do you really see that India is gonna? How much benefit will it accrue for Indians? A, and B, do you see any loan waivers? And there's been migration of labor. How do we come back? it's more of a generic economic question. I know I'm putting 2-3 questions together,
Sure.
but I think the idea mostly is centering around macroeconomic factors that whether will benefit, the challenges around migrant labor going away, will the supply system come back? So maybe a quick short answer on that side.
So let me give you specific answer rather than generic answer. We need to target getting $200 billion of foreign direct investment. We need to bring them into country like Tata Motors was brought into Sanand. We have to ensure that no company suffers single phase of what Tata Motors suffered. If we bring $200 billion of foreign direct investment in India in FY 2021, and we help, and that will only come if we bring them like Tata Motors was brought into Sanand and not in Singur, then we don't have to worry about growth. That $200 billion foreign direct investments will take care of growth. We also have to target companies like Suzuki. If you remember, in 1980, Suzuki came to India. They have survived all the ups and downs of India. Today, they are producing more cars in India than what they are producing in Suzuki worldwide. Because of Suzuki, we have developed large auto component industry, and we have Mothers and Sumi kind of companies which are global auto component makers. We have also developed local economy of auto repair mechanics, car financing firms, petrol distribution companies, and auto is now about 40% of India's manufacturing GDP. This is all possible because once Suzuki came and showed the path, and obviously there are contributions from companies like Tata Motors, Hero Motors, Bajaj Auto, and so on and so forth. But auto as a sector is where we have created jobs, where we have created GDP growth, where we have created exports. We have $14 billion trade surplus in automobiles last year. So we have to target Suzuki in garment industry, Suzuki in chemical industry, Suzuki in soft toys, Suzuki in engineering products, Suzuki in mobile phones, Suzuki in consumer durables, and get this $200 billion. One single thing, complete focus on that, help them settle like Tata Motors in Sanand and see the magic working. All these problems related to migrant labor, agriculture will start getting sorted out once we show path on foreign direct investment on manufacturing company. Now, is this too simplistic solution? Answer is obviously yes. Real life is far more complex and you have to manage multiple things. But like Arjun, focus was on the eye of the bird and everything else didn't matter. If we go with that kind of strategy, we can make a material difference. Second, without money, nothing is possible. You can't move the body if pran is not there. Economist pran is credit. We have to move credit flowing. And as I mentioned earlier, we are sitting on $2 trillion of debt asset called gold. How do we monetize that? How do we bring that from tijori into mainstream economy? If that money comes in, even 10%, that's $200 billion. Imagine $200 billion FDI and $200 billion of official gold circulating in Indian economy. That's $400 billion. And as I mentioned earlier, our total damage of 47 days is maybe $130 billion. You put another $200 billion for cost of restarting economy, that's $340 billion. And you have $400 billion possible here. So again, this is a test match. You have hit one ball for a 4. You have to ensure that you keep on building up on this.
Thank you. Another area of interest for a lot of people is real estate, and of course people are heavily invested into real estate and they're thinking about the future. It's been actually down for a very long time, and also as a construction industry, it tends to be the largest employment generator. So where do you foresee the impact of real estate, A, in terms of investor, B, in terms of overall economy, in terms of revival of jobs by construction sector?
So if you are a consumer, then real estate buying will be a dream. All these years, builders have used consumer as a football, bearing few exceptions. Photoshopping was invented by Indian developers, which can convert a nala into river, which can convert a desert into a jungle. Now they have to service customer. Now customer is the king in real estate because there are very few buyers. So if you are going to buy anything from a developer, buy it on your terms, discount, ask for a huge discount, do a bargain hunting. If I have to buy a property, I will probably start at 20% of last traded price and then see where it goes. So as a consumer, negotiate very, very hard, twist the builder and get a very, very good deal for you. If you are a developer, well, change your model. There is a karma theory. Whatever you have reaped, you have to, jo boya wahi paya. That's the kind of thing. You have to worry about customer. You can't take them for granted. You'll have to deliver products in time, of quality, and get word of mouth publicity from customer in order to ensure that you stay in the business. If you have a brand like Tata, Godrej, fair enough. Customer will trust you and come to you. But if you are XYZ, ABC, PQR, your existing customers will be your brand ambassador and you must service them. You can't take them for granted anymore. Third, as an economy, we have to focus on real estate because it has multiplier effect and it employs largest number of workers. How do we do that? We have to bring rule of law into construction. One plot of land, if builder X develops, it can have X amount of FSI. If builder Y develops, it could have X 2X. If builder Z develops, it could be 3X. That kind of law cannot work. Builders will have to shun parallel activity out of real estate industry, and they'll have to come together as industry group to get clear rule of law where submitting online application will allow them to build, and builder themselves should create a lobby which says that if any builder who is not complying with the rule of law, we will debar him and we will publish that this guy, no one should deal with him. Unless until that kind of self-discipline is brought in by builders and they bring rule of law into their industry, they are likely to be extremely vulnerable. So we need discipline on the part of builders. We need discipline on the part of regulators. We need rule of law in the industry. And we must ensure that customer is truly the king in real estate industry for our real estate industry to grow. Today, housing loan to GDP ratio is about 8 or 9%. In Western world, it is 70-80%. It shows the potential.
Sure, thanks. So one last question before we close the session, and this is a very important question, and I think it's very relevant also. We've mostly whenever we've talked in India, the return expectations have varied from 7-8% to approximately some people look at 15-16 or probably slightly higher than that also kind of return. With the current scenario over a longer period, do you think the return expectations should go down? People should adjust their return expectations? And for a moderate customer, what would be the ideal mix of a portfolio one should look at, positioning from a 5-year, 10-year perspective?
A very tough question, Shantanu. In fixed income, undoubtedly, you'll have to lower your return expectation because interest rates are unlikely to go up significantly. And if 10-year GSEC is, let's say, 6.25% on the old security, corporate debentures will be 7.5. That's the kind of return you could get in fixed income. Over a period of time, your coupon income will determine what is the return of the fixed income. On the other hand, in equity, now is the time to be greedy. In Jan 2020, I would have said equity returns should be probably in higher single digit or lower double digit. But now, because of the correction, I think we can increase it by 15 to 20%. At least for some time to come, you should expect higher return from equity because of this correction. Gold also, I expect slightly higher return compared to last few years, primarily because of this phase where lower interest rates and higher liquidity will support gold prices. In real estate, I think if you are a buyer at this point of time, you have good return possibility, but on your existing stock, you will have a sharp correction. So one will have to be constantly rebalancing the portfolio with a view to generate, let's say, lower double-digit return. Through appropriate investment in equity, gold, you should be able to generate overall lower double-digit return on the portfolio, despite keeping money in fixed income and real estate, where probably mid-single digit yield is possible. I'm not counting real estate appreciation, but just the yield, rental yield and coupon, that will be somewhere in mid-single digit.
Thank you so much, Nilesh, for your insights. I think I'd like to invite our CEO for the closing and thank you note over here. So, Abhijit, if you'd like to mention something.
Nilesh, thank you so much. These are wonderful answers. I've also been receiving comments from people that it is a very value-adding talk. You are a part of AMFI, and you also have been an advisor to the government. I just have one last question.
Yeah.
More of a time machine question, because you have said so many things about what to expect for the future. 2025, Nilesh Shah has moved 5 years ahead, and you're looking at what is happening around you. What is your vision for India as a nation? What is your vision on equity markets and the entire wealth creation in the last 5 years? If you can just cover that part before we close, it will be really inspiring for all of us.
So in my dream scenario in 2025, India has taken advantage of 2020 upheaval. In terms of brand, it is right there at the top as a country which provided hydroxychloroquine tablet and vaccine when the world needed it most. Second, it has emerged as not only back office of the world, where its IT companies and BPO companies and KPO companies bring brilliant Indian minds for providing cost-effective solutions to countries around the world, but it has also emerged as a strong competition to China as manufacturer to the world. Companies which moved out of China and came to India have found great joy, just like Suzuki has found in India, just like Hindustan Unilever has found in India. They are able to supply in 1.36 billion consumer market, and they are also able to export out of India through economies of scale. Third, India also has become inclusive nation. It has shifted many poor people from below poverty line to above poverty line. It has also become far more business friendly than it was earlier. Rule of law is established. Businessmen are encouraged. And we have a country which is showing the promise of democracy and demography to the world. And the world is looking forward to India as a successful model where despite diversification, despite diversity, demography and democracy is working for the well-being of people.
And the equity markets and the wealth creation for all our clients who are listening to you?
Well, I have one secret wish. China, has 3 trillion FX reserve, and in various parts of the world, litigation started against China for COVID-19. And in the fear that their assets overseas can be confiscated for COVID-19 cost, China shifted bulk of its reserve into gold. Their buying pushed gold prices significantly higher from current level, and that created wealth effect for every Indian. More importantly, because of that wealth effect, consumption continued, and because of becoming manufacturer to the world, we saw double-digit economic growth, and that was reflected into equity market as well. The combined wealth effect of gold prices moving up, courtesy China's buying, and equity markets doing well, courtesy we becoming service provider to the world as well as manufacturer to the world. Every Indian became far more wealthy in 2025 compared to 2020.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Nilesh. There are some more questions, but what we'll do is we'll actually go back to them individually and answer those questions, because
Sure.
we are aware that your time is important and time is money, and we want you to spend that time growing the Kotak mutual fund portfolio so that all our clients also grow their wealth, including all of us, because my SIP runs in Kotak
Thank you.
Large Cap Fund. But thank you so much. I think it was really mind-blowing, value-adding discussion. And to all the clients who are there on the call, thank you so much for your time. I'm really hopeful that you have found good value out of it, and the entire partnership of our clients with Karvy and Kotak will only grow further stronger as the wealth grows ahead. Once again, Nilesh and the entire Kotak team, thank you so much, and wish all of you a wonderful day ahead. God bless all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye Shantanu. Bye Abhijit. Bye Sabyasachi.